Hi, and welcome to this week's Facebook Live with me, Louisa Whitney from LKW Family Mediation. And this week we are talking about the second in a series of blogs focusing on sorting out the money. And the one that has been published this week is about property and mortgages. And I certainly know from the clients that I see in mediation how big an issue this is. You know, we as professionals, mediators, lawyers, financial planners, talk about property and mortgages. But when you are in the throes of a divorce and separation, what we're really talking about is your home and where you're going to live. And, you know, that's something that can throw up an awful lot of emotions in a divorce and separation. This can be partly because you may feel a significant emotional attachment to your current home, and it may be that leaving that is something that you really can't even contemplate. Or it can be that you are just very worried about where you're going to live, how you're going to be able to afford somewhere to live. And all of these things can play into making discussions difficult, because when we feel emotional and fearful, we often react defensively. So that can make discussions more complicated. But it can also affect our well-being, because of the fact that if you are worrying about something and waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about it, that has a significant effect on your well-being and your ability to function rationally and to talk about things rationally and all of those things. I would say the people that I see in mediation that struggle most are those that are having problems sleeping, because it just has such an effect on everything else. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I hope that you can see me okay. The sun is coming through really brightly in the atrium, which is wonderful because, let's face it, we all love to see the sunshine. And I really didn't want to block it out because it makes it a bit dark. But I do think the light is moving on the screen a little bit. If I move like that, hopefully that seems to be stopping flickering. So hopefully that makes it a bit better for you to watch. So I was going to talk a little bit about what I do in mediation to talk about issues concerning property and mortgages. The starting point in coming into mediation to talk about financial matters is always to get financial information together, because that means that you're working with exact figures in the meeting rather than estimates or I think it was this. And once you've got all of that information together, that then enables you to see exactly how much money you have got as a pot to look at housing yourselves. And what we do in mediation is we then look through what different options are so that you can see how they will impact upon you financially. So if one of your options is that one person stays in the property that you own at the moment and the other person is going to purchase an alternative property, then we can look at how that will change the figures you have of what money you've each got, what kind of mortgage it might mean that you need to obtain, because if there isn't enough capital to buy a property outright, then you're going to need some help with that by way of a mortgage. And that also lends itself into making sure things are affordable. So when we look at finances in mediation, it's very much a two-pronged approach. There's looking at what capital would be needed to buy a property, so what money needs to be put in place to buy a property, how much is needed, what kind of property are you looking for, in what area, how big, all of those things, and looking at what it's going to cost, not only for the actual property itself, but also when you factor in the costs of stamp duty and legal fees, having a survey, are you going to need to do some work to the property, what furniture might you need. Sometimes people have enough furniture in one bigger home to ensure they have furniture in two small homes, but that's not always the case. And sometimes people need to buy beds, sofas, TVs, kitchen stuff, all of that. So we look at what capital might be needed, but coupled with that, we also look about the impact on your income and outgoings position. Because even if you can afford to buy a property on the face of the capital, you've got to be able to afford to live in that property and to pay your bills. So one of the exercises that I take people through in mediation is looking at what are your bills going to be in that property. And that can sometimes be a difficult exercise because you are effectively forecasting what you're going to pay in a property that you don't yet live in. But there are tools available that can help you with that now. And some expenses may stay the same. You know, if your children are really keen footballers, they will continue to do football. You may still be going to the same place of work, have the same travel costs. Some of those things will stay the same. And if we have a picture of what your outgoings are likely to be in this new property, then you can look at what income you've got and how does that match up against the outgoings. Do you have a surplus every month? Do you have a shortfall? What is going to happen with regard to this? I'm not going to talk too much more about income and outgoings because that will come into the blog on maintenance that I'm going to do next week. And I also wanted to let you know that there won't be a Facebook Live next week because I'm going to be on holiday for a week. But what I'm going to do is the Facebook Live the following week, I will talk in depth about the blog that's going up on Monday about maintenance. And then I will pull the threads together in a Facebook Live with the last blog as well. So I hope that's going to be helpful. And it will also talk about how maintenance is arranged and what to do if your income and outgoings are not stacking up against your option, that kind of thing. So going back to property and mortgages, if it looks like you can't afford to do your best option on the face of the capital or on the face of the income and outgoings, and it's something that a few tweaks is not going to fix, then that may mean that that option is not the right one for you and you need to start exploring different options and what they will look like. When you're talking about property, sometimes that can be things like, can you look at property in a slightly different area? Sometimes even within the same town, there can be parts that are cheaper to purchase property and parts that aren't, or whether you can manage with a slightly smaller property or without a garage or without it being detached, or whatever the compromise might be. Sometimes it can just be a question of looking at that. And mediation is a really great way of exploring different options and tweaking things so that you can see together what the effect of that is. And it can really speed up the process of resolving financial issues because you can both sit there in a room and say, right, okay, so this is looking really difficult. What would happen if we looked at a property that was £50,000 cheaper? And you can then run the figures and see what happens with that. We can even go online, look at properties, see what that would mean. And it means both parties are getting the same information at the same moment and talking about how that affects them and what they can do. And it also enables you both to share priorities and share information so that you're both clear about what the other person's trying to achieve. It doesn't mean you have to agree with what the other person's trying to achieve, but unless you understand what it is they're trying to achieve, it makes it difficult to actually talk about things. So that's the way that looking at property and mortgages works in mediation. Sometimes it can be that you need more information to enable you to decide whether something is an option with regard to that. Mortgage capacity can be a really big issue in cases where somebody is separating or divorcing, because that again can be the difference between being a workable option in terms of what you're trying to achieve and not being a workable option. And in terms of mortgage, I always sort of say that there's a two-pronged test. One is that you've got to be able to obtain that mortgage and the bank or building society has to be agreeable to giving it to you based on the salary that you have and your credit rating. And also it has to be affordable, because if you are paying out large amounts of money for something else, then even if you've got a high salary, you may not be able to afford a really large mortgage. And again, that comes down to doing some sort of income and outgoings planning. And I hope that that gives you a sort of flavour of what it is to come into mediation when you're separating and to talk about property and issues relating to property. It's not easy, and I always get quite cross with people that sort of say mediation is some kind of fluffy option, because it really isn't. It takes enormous courage to sit in the same room as someone you're separating from and brainstorm together and talk about things and try and find an option that will work for both of you and for your children. But what I think can be really useful about the mediation process is, as I've already outlined, that hearing each other and that problem solving together. But also it's when you hit a wall because something isn't working or you're not sure what to do, you can also brainstorm, okay, so what do we need? Is it that we need some expert financial help from someone that knows about mortgages or can help us with a particular property related issue? Or is it that we need some other help because I'm struggling to come to terms with, for example, the house being sold because it makes me feel really emotional, in which case some more therapeutic help may be brought in to kind of deal with that particular issue. Or sometimes people just need more time to adjust to things. Again, in mediation, we can explore what happens and what's going to be the right way forward for you. So as I've said, the next blog will be going up on Monday, and that should be live in the morning, about 10 o'clock. And that will be focusing on the next in this series of blogs about maintenance. And that will cover child maintenance and spousal maintenance. And we'll again pick up what I was talking about earlier with the income and outgoings threads. There'll be no Facebook Live next week, as I said, on the Friday, but I will be back the following Friday to do a Facebook Live. If you would like to get free resources to help you with your separation and to manage it in the most constructive way possible, and I've got some really great things happening in the pipeline that the people on the mailing list are the first to hear about, then you can sign up for our free mailing list if you go to the link bit.ly/LKW Family list. And if you're a professional that works with couples who are separating, then again, you can access free resources for your clients to help them. And you can also get details of my forthcoming training events and networking events. I have training courses aimed at all professionals who work with couples who are separating. And the next one's coming up, or an essential skills, a refresher for mediators. And also I've got another networking event on the 2nd of April. And if you go to lkwfamilymediation.co.uk, you'll see there's our training program and all the links to book are on there. So if you're a professional and you'd like to sign up for our free mailing list, go to bit.ly/LKW FamMed sign up. That's all from me, and I hope that you have a good weekend, and I will be back in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks for watching.